Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Perfect Building Maintenance, New York Community Bank, All Nation Renovation, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Greenberg Traurig, LLP. Additional funding has been provided by grants from AVR Realty Company, LLC, Beechwood Organization, Briarwood Organization, Capital One Bank, C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman & Wakefield, the Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Stephen Napolitano, First American Title Insurance Company, Friedman, LLP, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, LLC, Genova, Burns & Gian Tomasi, Grubb & Ellis, Investors Savings Bank, Jack Jaffa & Associates Real Estate Consultants, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Madison Realty Capital, Markham LLP, Marcus Millichap Real Estate Investment Services, Margolin Weiner and Evans LLP, Massey Knackle Realty Services, M&T Bank, Meridian Capital Group, Moynihan Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Orphanides and Associates, Sterling and Sterling, Urban American, the Wickoff Group.
Everybody knows about Times Square, and everyone knows about this new building called 11 Times Square. This 1.1 million square foot, 40-story building is opening next year. This is a building that people said we needed for New York City. So today, I brought together the people involved with the building at 11 Times Square. My guests today include Stephen J. Pizicki, the chairman and CEO of SJP Properties, Ron Cernow, the co-chair of the real estate department at the law firm of Proskauer, William Anderson, the principal at Prudential Real Estate Investors, and last but not least, Michael Gagan, vice chairman at C.B. Richard Ellis. So, Pizicki, you know, you've been on the show a couple of times. You know, you're the kid from New Jersey. What did you know about Times Square? I mean, they just let you over to the Port Authority. What do you know about Times Square? Why did you go to Times Square?
What do I know about development?
That I agree, too, but that's beside the point.
You know, after developing 20 million feet over the past 25 plus years, we always, you know, we always concentrated in a territory that was a tri-state area. You know, to tell an investor that I'd be an expert on the entire East Coast or the entire country or be able to jump around markets, it always confused me why developers would do that. So Manhattan was always in our tri-state area the whole 27 years. We studied the market. We studied the supply and demand, rental rates, trends, where things were going. And at the time we were looking at New York in 05 and 06 and 07. Clearly, you know, this site was a major site and a site that you could put a substantial floor plate building on, which was important to me to be able to have a variation of size floor plates to be able to do a spec building and meet that market.
I mean, basically, we had a blighted site. I mean, we had a parking lot for years. We didn't really have anything, and then you found the site, or you had been looking at it, and you bought it. And then you brought somebody who had been involved with Times Square from the beginning. I mean, the true people who were involved with the rededication and the redevelopment of Times Square in the 90s and the 80s were the Prudential. I mean, you had made the commitment. So you had been there from the beginning, then we had the recession, we had a different market, and now Prudential comes back because you had been doing a lot of business with Steve Pizicki. Yes. How did Prudential look at the site?
Well, we've been a fan of Midtown Manhattan for years. Michael, been an investor for decades and decades and owned property on Park Avenue and other parts of the city. Always felt very positive about Midtown. Prudential Real Estate Investors is a global organization. We own properties in Japan, Tokyo, Paris, London. There are not very many Midtown Manhattans around the world. So given our previous history and our comfort and our previous ownership and our faith in Steve and his organization, it seemed like the right thing to do at the time.
So here's the situation that we have the developer, we have the an equity player,
Correct, yeah.
and then we build the building. Fortunately, you also have the other partner. I don't have enough room on my set to have everyone here, but you had the bank. And as you and I know, because we're a little older than some of these guys, there was a bank called Mid-Atlantic. It was a bank that you really were friends with, and you went to them after you went with this as a developer on a spec building. You went to PNC, which was what happened. So you had PNC and Bank of America saying, "We're interested too."
Well, we've had a great relationship with PNC. Through our years in the business, we're very loyal to people we work with. We tend to do a lot of repeat business with whether it be architects, engineers, bankers. So
I hope you feel that same way about attorneys.
Attorneys.
Okay.
Yes.
Turnell needs and brokers also.
Yes. No, there's no doubt we we do a lot of repeat business, as Bill will tell you. But clearly we felt very good about that group of banks. Today, banks are taking smaller and smaller pieces of large transactions, so you need a consortium of banks. And
I mean the combination of the lead banks of both PNC and Bank of America and Merrill Lynch were really the major players. Now we look at, your major tenant, the person who's made the commitment to 11 Times Square, Proskauer. But Proskauer really has more than involvement on 11 Times Square. They've been in Times Square when Times Square was a neighborhood that no one wanted to go. Now, you were at the firm when they moved to...
No, I came to the firm in 1997, so the firm had already been there. Actually, at my prior firm, we were representing News America in negotiating with David Solomon, who had been the developer of that building, and Proskauer had already signed the lease there. And at representing the News America, we actually went and negotiated with Proskauer at the time. So that was the...
Now, but Proskauer has been in 1585 for how many years?
20 years.
So 20 years ago, in 1990, in a time when the Pru was involved with the commitment, because Times Square, there was a lot of spec development in the 1990s and the 80s, but here's a different situation. Proskauer went to Times Square where people didn't want to go. I mean, it was Proskauer or Creveth who really went to Times Square and 8th Avenue. So Proskauer has made a commitment, and you've understood the situation. As Michael was saying prior to the show, Proskauer could have stayed at your present space. You have good space. There's nothing wrong with the space. Why'd Proskauer make a decision to continue to stay over there? Or, I mean, with a good broker like Michael, you could have gone to Lower Manhattan, you could have gone to the Trade Center, you could have maybe gone to 11th Avenue, you could have waited a couple of years and maybe gone to the Hudson Yards. Why did you decide to go to 11 Times Square?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think that the choices that we had were really relatively limited. For a 400,000 square foot tenant looking for truly Class A space, there weren't that many options. Downtown was certainly an option for us, and we looked at it, and we looked at it hard. But at the end of the day, I think that we just because of our long-time commitment to Midtown, it was going to be hard to get 200 partners to agree to move downtown. As far as Times Square is concerned, we are very comfortable there. After all these years, I think we all like the crowds. We like the idea that you walk outside and you feel like you're in the middle of New York every day. It's something that we're used to, and we welcome the prospect of staying there and staying in that environment.
Let's talk about Proskauer, other people looking in the area of 11 Times Square. I mean, you're right at the corner of the 42nd Street and 8th Avenue, between 41st and 42nd Street. You're directly across the street from the Port Authority. You have all the trains over there. You have everything over there. Then you're not too far away from, Penn Station. You have the opportunities, and you're not too far from Grand Central. So you have all those conveniences. So who are the tenants who are looking, besides Proskauer today, for space like 11 Times Square?
Well, now virtually every major tenant looks at that area. It's a vibrant community. As we've talked about the hotels that have come online recently, the Intercontinental. We talk about the restaurants in that area. It is clearly, it's a 24/7 environment. It is, but now, unlike in 1991 when Proskauer made the decision, maybe for new development at that time to go to 1585, they made it for the same reasons this time. Now, an opportunity for new development, but into a community that has a very prestigious list of tenants, from Viacom and Condé Nast to the New York Times to Bank of America, Morgan Stanley. It goes on and on. So it's a much easier decision today than the decision that Proskauer made back in 1585 or in 1991. But I think it was a lot of the same. It was a pursuit of a lot of the same attributes: new development, vibrant community, and they had the foresight then, and they don't need the foresight now. That the community is probably one of the top communities within the Manhattan marketplace today.
I mean, Bill, when Prudential looks at a development, you look at, in addition to the office component, you look at the retail component, you also look at the residential component. There's no residential component over there, but what's going on, as I said earlier, Related has this massive deal 2 blocks away where they're going to have 11 or 1,200 residential units. 20%, there's an affordable component, there's a condo component, there's a limited service hotel called the Pod Hotel, there's theaters. So, I mean, that must have given Prudential an additional feeling of why they should have gone there.
Yeah, I think the growth and what you've seen, the activity really kind of beginning with the New York Times building from a commercial perspective, and then the residential activity that's continued north up 8th Avenue and then on over to 11th Avenue. It's pretty interesting to see what that's done. It brings that 24-hour population, even up higher, supports the retail, which is important to this asset, and makes it a better office environment for the people in the office tower. So I think all those uses working together just reinforce each other.
You were saying part of the show, Ron, that you have 400,000 square feet at 1585. You're moving into 400,000 square feet. People would say, why are you only taking 400,000 square feet? I think part of the reason is you don't need libraries anymore, as we were talking about. There's more use, better efficiency at 11 Times Square. There's other situations. Now, but you were also saying the availability of growth in all the other situations.
Right. I mean, for us, the move from 1585 to 11 Times Square was a difficult decision because 1585 is a perfectly good building, and we're very happy being there. So we really had to look at 11 Times Square and identify what about this deal, why are we really doing it? And the first and most prominent reason is because we were landlocked at 1585. We've used all of our expansion space and we have no place else to go. So for us, we're planning on growing, we're planning on expanding and doing it aggressively. So the opportunity to get serious expansion options at 11 Times Square was, if I had to say what was the one thing, it was probably that. The second thing was the opportunity to really redo our space, do it in a more efficient basis. 1585, it's a great building, but it's 20 years old, and our space is 20 years old. We now had this golden opportunity to go to brand new space, design it a lot more efficiently, do it in a more modern way, increase the density, the number of lawyers that were able to fit into the space. So for us, when we put that together with the expansion options, the expansion possibilities, those were the 2 major selling points.
With the exception of who the landlord was, it's a great building. Now. But at least we knew the Prudential was there, and we knew this. What are you planning to do? You have 1 million square feet. I know, as Michael just said, there's a lot of people looking at space, but you were talking about pre-builds, other types. What type of other things are you planning to do at 11 Times Square in the office component? We'll talk about the retail in a second.
Having developed speculative office buildings for over 25 years and having developed the volume of buildings that we've done, we really had to build a building that would accommodate a 3,000-foot tenant comfortably and a tenant that was over 400,000 feet comfortably. So the activity on the building is from very small tenants. Like we said, we're doing a couple floors of pre-built space. and we're talking to tenants that are 200,000-300,000 feet right now. So the activity is terrific. You know, a tenant can feel comfortable being a small tenant in the building or a very large tenant in the building, and I think it was the way the building was thought out and conceived. And I think that the energy efficiency of the building and the LEED certification, as people more and more start understanding what a building that's LEED Gold, the air quality is going to be, you know, staggering for the productivity. You know, the younger people, you know, I think Proskauer is clearly is a growth firm. They're a dynamic organization. They're, you know, expert in many areas of the law. And I think they see that recruiting is going to be important. And the younger people understand the benefits of the LEED indicators, particularly the air quality, I think is going to be the most dramatic advantage to the office user in that type of building.
Michael, with regard to what Steve just said, you know, about the 3,000 square foot tenant, do you see the possibility, because hedge funds love luxury spaces, they all, you know, they like these unique spaces, and I think what Ron said prior to the show was that there are, you know, when you go to the top floor and you see those towers and you see those views, you know, you really have, do you see certain people like the leading financial services or hedge funds coming into 11 Times Square?
No question, for two reasons. One, they look for technology-rich buildings. They look for efficient buildings. They have a tendency, the financial services industry, as well as the legal profession, they have a tendency to spend an inordinate amount of time at the building because they're working around the clock. They have commitments to meet at 24 hours a day, and to some extent, their working environment is key for them. So being in a new building, having something with that type of image, as well as that type of functionality, is key for their business.
Let's talk about the retail. I mean, you have, what, 55,000 square feet of potential?
That's correct.
Of retail. So what do you see as the retail? I mean, as I said prior to the show, the Applebee's across the street does $14 million a year. 20,000 people walk into the Applebee's every week, and that's directly across the street from you. Right. So what type of retail do you foresee at 11 Times Square?
Well, the volume of people, the pedestrian traffic in Times Square is staggering. And clearly any type of retail is fueled by that kind of disposable income and volume. So Times Square has been acceptable from a retail standpoint to every type of retail tenant. We're seeing more and more apparel tenants wanting to come into Times Square. Clearly, theme restaurants. In addition to the retail space, there's 16,000 foot of signage that will go on the exterior of the building, and many of these tenants are.
I thought it was going to say Proskauer over there. You know,
it does say we have. That's the clearly in Times Square they want to encourage signage. So we probably have more signage opportunity than any building in Midtown Manhattan today.
No, but I think, you know, we were joking before that 1585 is close to the new Shake Shack. You know, right now he's even going to be closer to the Shake Shack over here. And you know, just the volumes and the situation. Now, where do you see any companies coming over from New Jersey or other places over here, you know, to 11 Times Square? I mean, Michael was talking before.
You know, because of the Jersey waterfront, there's clearly a relationship between New Jersey and New York for the office user. And I think it's a positive thing because a lot of the back office and support office is on the waterfront, and there needs to be a link, you know, and clearly there's great transportation with the ferries and the path and the trains to go back and forth. So we're seeing tenants from New Jersey come into New York. Many of the law firms have opened up at least, you know, starting offices, which you probably see. And, you know, the businesses do ebb and flow back and forth from the waterfront to New York, to Manhattan, particularly with the West Side being so convenient with the, you know, Moynihan Station about to open, you know, the the Port Authority renovating the Port Authority building. So the transportation hubs are critical. All of the subway lines are on 8th Avenue, and it makes it just easy to get around New York.
Do you see, you know, you have Ernst & Young in Times Square. Do you see any of the other accounting firms perhaps looking at an 11 Times Square as a possible head? I mean, not because the big four could be there, and there are a lot of regional firms. I mean, it's a perfect lead-in with Proskauer of being partners in this type of building over there.
Yeah, well, I mean, absolutely. They, as we said, for the the service industry, both from a recruitment standpoint as well as from just an overall satisfaction with their working environment, it's a perfect place to locate. You know, we'll all be we're going to be looking over the course of the next couple weeks over the Deloitte decision, and that tells us that they may very well stay downtown. But there are a host of other service firms and accounting firms that will be...
But you know, you bring up a good point. Deloitte right now has a small office, you know, at 1633.
Yes.
And they are downtown.
Yep.
And, you know, Ron brought up the fact before 200 partners, they weren't sure that they wanted to relocate to downtown. I mean, downtown is fine, but, you know, it's still, as one would say, a couple of years before all of the construction is completed, and there's a different situation.
Yes.
I could see a Deloitte or other firms saying, hey, I can move in. I'm ready over here.
No question. You know, to some extent, the migration between Midtown and downtown hasn't been so great, and that's because firms have a tendency, commutation patterns are built, and people that are comfortable downtown normally stay downtown, and similarly in Midtown. But you're right, this is a very unique environment, and I think the Midtown market poses certainly something that's very attractive, and the Times Square area in particular. And as I said earlier, there's nothing like new construction.
Bill, quick question. Since Prue was involved in the 80s and 90s in Times Square, how difficult was it for them to get committed to go back to go with Steve in 2005?
You know, Michael, it wasn't really that difficult because, as I said, we've been in Manhattan for years, both downtown and Midtown, so we understand the markets well. We owned 3 buildings at the time in Midtown. You know, I'm on the Grand Central Partnership Board, so I've been involved in Midtown for years and years. So we studied the site, we liked the site, and, you know, New York Times buildings there. Obviously, we talked about all the accessibility. You've got the Port Authority across the street, and the general activity that goes up and down, and the traffic that's on 42nd Street. So it was really, one had to just study the financial models, be sure we're comfortable with what the rent projections were, and the site itself was not really a difficult issue for us.
Ron, your employees, how do, you know, 1585 is one section of Times Square, and this is 11 Times Square. I mean, I think there's more accessibility in a number of things at 11 Times Square. How is the perception? I mean, the fact that, like Steve said, younger people like green buildings and other, I mean, is that helping? I mean,
yeah, I mean, you know,
and also moving new, you know, having a new facility, having great new views.
We've started to bring our employees through the building, and, you know, everybody walks into this building. That's frankly the biggest selling point. It's very easy to kind of look at the building in the abstract and say, you know, it's near Port Authority, it's on 8th Avenue, it's not quite where we are. You got to go to the building. And once you go to the building and you walk into the lobby on 41st Street, it's really just an awesome, breathtaking building. And you were discussing the retail before. You know, the retail component to a lot of lawyers, and everybody says to themselves, do we want to be in that environment? And the fact is that when you walk in on 41st Street, right across the street from the New York Times building, it doesn't feel like you're on 42nd Street at all. I mean, the building is really designed to create a real distinction between those two aspects of the building. So for us, you know, everybody I think is really looking forward to it. People, you know, I've been sure to watch their faces when we take them through, and it's really something. I really get it.
So when do you think you'll be in there physically in the building?
We'll be there January 15th. It's very soon. I think
Steve, I think that was kind of an interesting decision. When you took over the project from Milstein and you looked at the plans, you and your team, including us, we went through this building and we looked at the core, we looked at the initial entrance on 42nd Street, had that same comment about was it right to mix the office and the retail users. You all decided to make the decision to put it on 41st Street, which I think really was a very, very, very important decision and a very good decision.
Yeah, we studied Times Square extensively. We walked through every building there, the new buildings and any building that had, the Midtown Manhattan is a treasure trove of architecture. So for us, we walked every building in Midtown that made sense, that we wanted to incorporate some aspect of. But clearly, it's a little confusing in, an office user doesn't want to walk by the entrance to his office building and not notice it. And the retail, we wrapped the retail on 8th over to 42nd Street where it belonged. We brought the lobby on 41st, create a corporate corridor. 41st Street's a great street for black car waiting, which is something that, a lot of the firms in the bow tie area have difficulty getting access to. Besides this, the subway entrances are in the building. So I think that just from a planning standpoint, we saw that the lobbies were a little small, for accommodating the kind of traffic that goes through a 1 million+ square foot building. We have a large 6,000 foot lobby. Our messenger center and loading areas are oversized to not commingle people and freight or supplies coming into the building. So it really creates a nice concierge feeling for the arrival of a guest and the population in the building.
And since I've been at 11 Times Square, and I've been to the entrance on 41st Street does make a difference because you don't feel that you're on 42nd Street, and I think that's an important situation. I think the combination of the location, the way it was created, the availability, and the team really has made this a totally unique deal. And even though you're the kid from New Jersey, sometimes, but you had learned already. You had gone to the Platinum. You had built the residential building not too far away. So you knew what Times Square was like.
The Platinum's been very successful for us. It's 220 units. We have about 9 units left, and it was very successful. Prue is also a partner there, as they are a partner in 45 Park. Both assets have done extraordinarily well.
So we know that they've done well, and everything will do well. I'd like to thank the 11 Times Square team for being here, and we look forward to January when you move in there so we can see the official opening. Stephen J. Pizicki, Ron Cernow, Bill Anderson, and Michael Gagan. See you next week.
Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Perfect Building Maintenance, New York Community Bank, All Nation Renovation, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Greenberg Traurig, LLP. Additional funding has been provided by grants from AVR Realty Company, LLC, Beechwood Organization, Briarwood Organization, Capital One Bank, C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman & Wakefield, the Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Stephen Napolitano, First American Title Insurance Company, Friedman, LLP, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, LLC, Genova, Burns & Gian Tomasi, Grubb & Ellis, Investors Savings Bank, Jack Jaffa & Associates Real Estate Consultants, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Madison Realty Capital, Markham LLP, Marcus Millichap Real Estate Investment Services, Margolin Weiner and Evans LLP, Massey Knackle Realty Services, M&T Bank, Meridian Capital Group, Moynihan Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Orphanides and Associates, Sterling and Sterling, Urban American, the Wickoff Group.